That's what I'm gonna do too.
Camera that big? You can tell every week you just mess with the laws.
Give him away.
It's like, what should I wear?
Drive up to probably shoot 100.
Oh yeah. Listen, on those courses,
12
So we got Anno and family zooming in from various parts of the country, California, Arizona. Hi, everybody. On behalf of Doug, Brad, myself, and our families. Thank you. Little bit of U of M rouser. Anna, we got that in for you, right? So, little order of events here. We're gonna do, Anna sent a little something she'd like us to read. Yeah, then we're gonna do a little opening prayer. Ruby's dear friend, Galena, and neighbor, going to play some music. Carol Anthony, sister-in-law, is going to do a bit of a eulogy. Brad's going to do songs Ruby loved. Bet anybody can guess what some of those are. Pick me up on your way down. Randy's in the cellar, things like that. And then we'll do open mic. Anna, speaking for you on this one, all right?
Somebody's microphone is on.
Yeah, oh, somebody's what? Yeah, that's this week. Can you hear me? Well, okay, here we go. So I'm speaking on behalf of Anno. She sent this note. And Anno thanks us all for gathering right here in downtown Helena, where the stores and alleys were their haunts, and they grew up as downtown kids. The three Hanson girls, our mom Ellie, and Anna and Ruby, and the Guilfoyle cousins. Thanks for making the trek. Followed by the Brooms, which Anna refers to us as the Broomers. So there's an irony that in this very building, they knew all the shops, storekeepers, and the people who lived upstairs in the apartments, including Corny Stein, the town cop. The whistle blows at 9. So this is the time to remember all things Ruby. Wit, humor, curiosity. She was always a seeker and a lifelong student. Love of music, and often her willingness to perform. There's another person in the room willing to perform, and a namesake. We have Anna Mae, and we're here for Ruby. And when you see the little 3.5-year-old girl bobbing around the room performing, that's the namesake and our granddaughter, Ruby Mae. You're beautiful. Ruby was a very thoughtful person. Old-fashioned manners, impeccable taste, was involved and was very evident in everything about her. The appropriateness of her gifts, and her most precious gift, her welcoming presence, and her ability to listen. No matter how many times a day we talked, and it was often, this is Anna, remember, I called her Senorita, and it always brought a chuckle. She called her Anno Banana, and it always warmed in my heart. How can you miss a person so much when their spirit is still with you? Later, Senorita. Love from Anno Banana. Let us pray. Oh God, you've been our refuge from generation to generation, before the mountains were the mountains, or even before the earth and the world were made. You are God from everlasting to everlasting, and the world without end. God, our Creator, Jesus Christ, our Redeemer and strength, give peace and rest to our beloved Ruby. With all your saints in heaven, without sorrow or pain, but true everlasting life. Blessed be your life now in your heavenly home. And even at the grave, may we make our song. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Peace, love, joy, celebration and strength be with us all. Amen. Now it's time for the celebration and strength part. Huh? What do you think? Alina, it's all yours.
I just want to say a few words. At the top, I'll cry. Ruby was the first one to welcome, I'm friend the neighbor, and Ruby was the first one to welcome me to the neighborhood when I moved. She showed up very quick as she always was walking, introduced herself and said, oh, as soon as I saw the piano, I said, I want to get to know you. And that's why we got friends right away. And she was, as you know, very sharp and joking and something. I have to say that one joke. I started the garden, as many of you know. I started years ago, and I come from work at 9:30 p.m. And at 10, it was right time, it was light. You do it when you can, literally. I start to dig. So Ruby called me. I had before cellular, regular phone. What the heck you Russian doing there? I said, come here. So she put her raincoat over pajama. And I said, I saw this Russian during summer in my neighborhood. And I said, just hold. She was so fun saying this thing. She loved actually very much Russian culture, Russian food, and she always repeated words phonetically, correctly, totally correctly, and quickly. She always was saying quick. So, two things. We call her Rubichka. It's a very tender wage card in the Russian way when you get it, lovingly, like adorable. And she also signed the card, Rubichka and Babuchka, her character for Precious. Ruby told me also first, I heard from her first time, 99. We always listened to each other, 99. So, 99, Rubichka, I'll play the pieces that you love. Many of you know that she was the life of the party. Oh my God, we had hilarious parties. I sent at night from pictures to family. We were dressing crazy, we were going nuts. So many memories. We also saved each other very often. I love you, like, hey. She was teasing me with my accent. I love you, 99. So I love you, 99. And I hope you will bring a lot of lights up there and you with us. So I played the pieces. One starts soft, she loved this piece a lot. And then when it was jazzing up, she always was started to jazz in it. I just picture who knows how she was even picturing. And the other also, she loved to dance with the other two. It's a Russian gypsy music, you might know it. She loved it so much. So that is very beautiful. Ruby dancing with some Russian people walking here, around here, flower there, just and going wild. I don't know. It's combination of two pieces that she lost. Can't do it, it's not better.
We'll give it a shot here. Ruby Hansen had a lifetime of roles as daughter, sister, cousin, co-worker, and friend. But the role many of us here knew best was Ruby's role as fun aunt. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby. Her introduction into being an aunt was started by the three Bruin boys, Doug, Brad, and Greg. She embraced her role with gusto. It was clear from the beginning she would be a fun aunt. Ruby was an important fixture in the Bruin boys' childhood. She could be counted on to show up for Sunday dinner at Ellie and Deacon's, first in line if roast beef was on the menu. The photo albums from this era have lots of pictures of Ruby in really cool outfits posing with the little Bruin boys. Ruby was a young, stylish aunt in the day, dressing like a Delano Kardashian with great hats and amazing coats. Some Ruby stories from this era are legendary in the family. Every member knows the story of Ruby taking the three Bruin boys to the circus and losing Greg. We know she would pile the three wild boys in the backseat of the VW Bug and head out for adventures. It could be a production at the Children's Theater, or it might be exploring abandoned houses. There's a story about Ruby taking the Bruin boys to shoot pigeons in somebody's barn. Little boys, loaded rifles, what could go wrong? She took them on all kinds of outings that tired parents of three rambunctious boys might not be up for. But Ruby always was. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby. One would think after being an aunt-in-chief for three rowdy Bruin boys, Ruby could just fold it in with the next generation. But that was out of the question. She had a role that no one else could fill. She lived in both Phoenix and Minnesota, so every niece got to know and love Ruby. She took them all on adventures: the Children's Theater, the Swedish Institute, parades, festivals, concerts, and lunch at fun restaurants. She made their worlds bigger. Ruby had that goofy sense of humor that kids are naturally drawn to. I have a vivid memory of being on Greg and Carol's deck in Delano. Ashley was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Ruby wedged herself into a child-sized lawn chair to be silly, and then could not get out. She stood up and the chair stayed firmly attached to her butt. For Ashley, this was comedic gold, and she doubled over, scream laughing. Ruby then pretended to not know the chair was there and kept turning in circles, saying, "What? Ashley." I was fairly new to the family at this point and got a huge kick out of seeing this Aunt Ruby in action. I thought, man, everybody needs an aunt like this. Ruby was never the aunt in the corner wishing that kids these days had better manners. She thought the inappropriate was hilarious. When Kate and Claire were in middle school, Ruby picked up other teenage slang. One term for an annoying person at that point was butt munch. Ruby loved that one and could always make Kate and Claire laugh by casually calling someone a butt munch. Ruby taught every niece and nephew the Grandma's in the Cellar song that you'll hear later. It's gross. The kids loved it. At kids' birthday parties, Ruby was not the aunt in the kitchen doing the dishes. She was all up in that party, having a ball. She'd be whacking the piano with the best of them, or singing happy birthday with a lot of gusto. There's a video of her from Allison's 9th birthday party in Phoenix. It shows Ruby running full bore in a relay race that involved popping a water balloon with her butt. The kids would know that Ruby was in it to win it. In so many cases, over the years, the party just didn't start till Ruby walked in. Everyone should have an opportunity. Ruby created a wonderful tradition with each of her nephew's girls, making gingerbread houses. This was a day-long affair at Ruby's house. These are not little gingerbread houses from kids from Target. This was the real deal, real baked gingerbread. Ruby and the kids all ate easily 5 pounds of candy in the process of decorating these masterpieces. I suppose it should be mentioned that when Ruby was in charge, rules got difficult. Sometimes a lot. But honestly, everyone should have an aunt like that. That gingerbread house tradition left an indelible, cherished memory with each one of her grandnieces. Music of any kind was Ruby's passion, her lifeblood. She didn't need much, if any, encouragement to know about a song. She was an accomplished trumpet player. Her home was filled with instruments, piano, guitar, egg shakers, harmonicas, hand drums, and kazoos. She loved to create marching bands with the girls when they were little. While lots of adults might cringe at the sound of all that racket, Ruby was up in the middle of it, even creating it. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby, someone who encourages their inner creativity, however loud and chaotic it may manifest. If you are a parent, you know that at a middle school band or choir concert, the most coveted seats are way in the back. You can get out faster. But not for Ruby. She was up front for more school concerts than I can count. Her unwavering support for her nieces was not limited to choir concerts. She was there for gymnastic meets, basketball games, rugby, tennis, track, and soccer games. If her niece was going to be a shrub in the school play or polishing the bench at a game, Ruby would be right there, clapping her hands off and giving a woo! She was a super fan before that was even a thing. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby who, despite how you may feel about yourself, always thinks you're amazing. Ruby was a seeker, a lifelong learner. they also saw that branches on our tree do not have to be identical to belong and to be valued. They saw that when it's all said and done, pull up your lawn chair, you're part of this tribe. Ruby was our family historian, the keeper of the history and the photos. She'd tell us that Grandma Ann was so tiny when she was born she could fit in a shoebox. And that Grandpa Roy was absolutely passionate about fishing. She could describe the bakery that her mom and dad owned in Delano. And she'd also remind us of those little things, like that Greg once won a beautiful baby photo contest, or that Hubert Humphrey once autographed Doug's cast. She loved to talk about old Delano and what businesses and people used to occupy the buildings. She knew things that can't be Googled. Some tales were told repeatedly over the years, and that is exactly how a family's history is passed down through the generations. She was the keeper of our stories. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby. One would think, after 20 years of being a stellar aunt to 6 grandnieces, Ruby could throw back a bit with the next generation. Not a chance. Olivia, Avery, Vin, James, Max, Asher, Ruby May, and Bruin brought her joy beyond measure. Whenever she spent time with any of them, she would report back how smart they are and how funny they are. She'd often say how lucky they are to have such great parents and devoted grandparents. I think it was an honor of a lifetime for Ruby when Megan and Stuart named their adorable daughter Ruby May. Aunt Ruby took huge delight in Ruby May's spunk and pizzazz. Perhaps seeing a bit of herself in that little whirlwind of a girl. She adored each of her great-great-nieces and great-great-nephews and loved to see their pictures and hear every detail of their life. Everyone should be that loved. Everyone should have an Aunt Ruby. And we were the lucky ones who did. At every family party, wedding, birthday, baptism, and day of the lake going forward, Aunt Ruby will be missed. But more importantly, she will be remembered as our fun aunt who made a difference in the lives of 3 generations. I'd like to close with just a little poem I came across that made me think of Ruby. Remember me in the family tree, my name, my days, my strife. Then I'll ride upon the wings of time and live an endless life.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Truly appreciate seeing everybody to celebrate Ruby's life. How can we celebrate Ruby's life without singing Ruby's greatest hits that Kate just coined a little bit? These are some of the songs that I grew up with. I know a lot of people know these songs as well. I did, on some of these songs, I kind of messed around with the words a little bit just to kind of make it more Ruby. But I just want to start out with the first song. It's Cowboy Sweetheart. Now, Ruby, she loved the yodel. I mean, that's what this song is all about, yodel. I looked high and low, I couldn't find any yodel. So, unfortunately, just gonna have to put up with me on this one. So, let's see how it goes, shall we? I want to be a cowboy sweetheart. I want to learn to rope and to ride. I want to ride over the range and the desert, out west of the great divide. I want to hear the coyotes howl while the sun sets in the west. I want to be a cowboy sweetheart. That's my her hands to this song. If she were here, she'd be the loudest. She'd be the leader of this band. Now it's up to us to yodelay, ooh, and we'll do the best we can. Yodelay, 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 yodelay. Singing the song and teaching the song for generation after generation. And it's interesting because there's more than just one verse. We only say one verse about Grandma who was in the cellar. But Grandma was also in the attic. And I came up with another verse, memorizing or talking about another memory, fond memory I had with Ruby, my brother do, and that's Sunday afternoons at Mom and Dad's house on roast beef dinner. So we're going to mix a little out of the song as well. Now this one you might know, so please feel free to sing along. Grandma's in the cellar. Oh, you can't just smell it. Biscuits on her mouth on the stove. In her eye there is a matter that she's dripping in the night. And she whistles at her, runs down the road. Down the road, down the road. And she whistles at her, runs down the road. In her eye there is a matter that she's dripping in the night. And she whistles at her, runs down the road. Speaking of noses, I smell something. You guys smell it? Roast beef. As Ruby roast beef, and we shout grief if you hold on until we can say a prayer. She would be the first sentence. In addition, I would reckon that she had a little bit more than her share. Their share, their share. Yes, she had a little bit more than her share. Oh, she stopped by on Sundays, we'd eat until Monday, and she had a little bit more than her share. Down her road, down her road, she whistled as her in her eye there's a smack, and she's dripping in the night, and she whistled as her runs down her road. There, look here. Yeah, Ruby loved all type of music. She loved country western, and this particular one, she wouldn't just sing the song, she would live the song. It was just fun watching her perform these songs. It's just in my mind forever. So this one's all called Pick Me Up on Your Way Down. And I've gone ahead and kind of come up with a couple different lines for you. Sorry. So go. You were mine for this while, now you're putting out the sky, and you never want to look back at your home across the track. You're the gospel of the town, but my heart can still sound where you tossed it all around. Pick me up on your way down. Pick me up on your way down, and you're moving all alone. When the land starts to bore you, head on back where you belong. that we would play over and over and over again. There's a song there called "It Could Be a Wonderful World." This is kind of a sing-along song. Some of you may know, some of you may not, but maybe we can just practice the chorus and we can go from there. If we could consider each other neighbor, friend, or brother, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. If each little kid could have fresh milk each day, if each working man had enough time to play, if each homeless soul had a good place to stay, it could be a wonderful world. Oh, it could be a wonderful world. If we could consider each other neighbors and brother, neighbors and all around, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. Oh, it could be a wonderful world. Heaven or the rich were content, strangers were welcome wherever they went. If each of us knew what true brotherhood meant, it could be a wonderful world. Oh, it could be a wonderful world. We could consider each other a neighbor, friend, or a brother. It could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. Oh, it could be a wonderful world. Sing with me, I'll sing with you. So easy, so easy, so easy. Sing with me, I'll sing with you. So easy, so we are marching to Pretoria, Pretoria, Pretoria. We are marching to Pretoria, Pretoria. Now that's the main hits I have of Ruby, but we all know where Ruby went. She went to the University of Minnesota, and of course she went there when Bob Dylan was at the University of Minnesota, so of course they were personal friends. But they hung out together, so I pull out a Bob Dylan song that this might be suitable to sing for Ruby tonight, but I gotta just scratch it. This could be a train wreck. My head used to be smaller. Let's see if we got the right key. So Before
So I am Sister Charlotte Barris, and I'm sure some of you have heard about me. And I was just giving some reflections on my year Ruby. I think it was about 2005, I went to a class, and we were sitting around tables. It was with Wisdom Ways, with Joseph, and I came in and sat down. Sure enough, I sat next to Ruby. And from then on, Ruby and I had to be the best of friends. And I cared for my Down syndrome brother at home, about 2 miles away. And I had 3 other Down syndrome people living with me as well. And so I would come late, because we ate at 5:30 and this class started at 6. Every week I arrived, and Ruby would sit right by the door and have a place for me to ensure that I was always with her. And I discovered over time that Ruby is a seeker. And driving over here with Mary, we were trying to remember, what was it? What was she seeking? And it was this knowledge and depth and desire to know more of God, to know more of be with people who were searching in the direction she was seeking. And I don't know if, and many of you know this, but she had just gone through the RCIA program, which is the preparation program to become a Catholic at Basilica. And she had just finished that program and seemed a little disappointed in becoming a Catholic. And so we were together, and then she decided she would like to be a consociate. And consociates are women and men who want to support the sisters in their work and their ministry. So our little statement is that we love God and we love your neighbor without distinction. So the Sisters of St. Joseph are well noted for the amount of social justice work they do. And so Ruby wanted to be part of that, so she became a consociate, and then I accompanied her. And eventually she also accompanied Mary and welcomed Mary into the consociates as well. Over time I discovered Ruby's love of music, and so with our group home, we had 4 tickets to the Minnesota Orchestra. And so 2 of them were for Down syndrome, and then 2 were for anyone else, myself included, and so I'd often invite Ruby. And so she in turn would invite me over here to this side of the road to go to the Wayzata Orchestra or to go to these various concerts at these various churches. So we were always going, and before though, if you go to a concert, you have to go out to eat. And so I have been in many restaurants, especially the one on Lake Minnetonka in downtown Wayzata. I can't remember the name, but she loved that one. And I've been over here on the river a few times, but I guess that one's gone. But one time the Crow River was flooded, and she was just so aghast that we couldn't sit down right next to the river. And then other stories I remember is I have a friend who had a lovely place in Ahwatukee in Phoenix. And so I would go down and stay at the house, and Ruby was there in town as well. So she insisted on connecting, and so we had to go hiking, and we had to go to all our favorite spots, and we had to go out to our favorite place for lunch. And I was really struck when we had to drive through the neighborhood of Native American people who she used to serve. And she would tell stories about those people and the work that she did there. And it was just a side of Ruby that I hadn't really met before, but it was deep in her heart. And then one of those evenings, we went to Dove's on a lake of all things in Phoenix, and we had a lovely, lovely dinner and pat. And then we went out on this little leopard pontoon of all things, and toured around this little lake system. And it was a wonderful memory, but a wonderful opportunity to start getting to know Ruby's family, because it's like, I know all of you here. I know how to make gingerbread poses, and she would go through all those details. And I would hear about her nephews and how she loved each of them, and all of her nieces and great nieces and nephews she was so excited when you named the little one Ruby May after her. Even though she was starting to lose her memory, she was just thrilled to be so honored. And so it's a privilege to be here with you, and a privilege to have known such a lovely, lovely, beautiful person. And I do hope in her seeking that she is now with God and has found the answer to her questions in the arms of God.
Ruby May wanted to say something. So Ruby May called Ruby B, because she just, whenever she said name, she said the last syllable of it. So what do we call it? We call it B, right? What do you want to say to B? You say it? You say it. I love you, B. You say I love you, B. Good job. Good job. You're done? Okay, good job.
Well, Doug and I, my kids that are watching on Zoom over here, it's Only Connection. And when Carol Anthony did a eulogy and she mentioned Ruby not always following the rules, it brought to mind a little incident in Ahwatukee when my kids were in grade school. And in fact, kids, I saw quite a few pink noodles. Allie would write, "To the rooster." Thank you, thank you, thank you. To the rooster. Jackie would write, "Dear urinator." I'm not quite sure why. Ruby lived in Arizona for about 10 years, and she lived there during my kids' grade school years, and it was awesome. She'd go to all their events, as Carol mentioned. And this one time, she took my kids, and she'd take them to the city of Guadalupe, where they had, basically a Mexican-American, Yaqui Indian, extremely poor population. And she'd take them to things like celebration of the dead, cultural things, which my kids loved. But one time she took them to Guadalupe and they came back in clothes that they didn't live in. And carrying a bag with some extra clothes. And I said, "Ruby, where did my kids get these clothes?" And she said, "Well, and Ruby was the director of fundraising for the city of Guadalupe. It was her job to get out and write grants and encourage businesses to donate to this poor, disadvantaged community." And she said, "Well, Pat," she said, "once a year, the city of Guadalupe invites all the poor, disadvantaged children to come down and pick up some clothing." And I said, "Ruby, how do you deliver clothes back when she's the director?" So she said they had a blast. And the kids were so happy with their new clothing, but I just thought, it just gives you an example of Ruby. She was just out to have fun. Kids kept the clothes. I just wanted to share that with you.
Hello everyone, and Anne especially. My name is Mary Hunt, and I have the pleasure of having Ruby as my companion as I prepared and discerned about the American Social with the Sisters of St. Joseph. I actually barely knew her, but requested her as my companion after one meeting where I just thought she seemed so bright and funny that I was sure we'd have a great time together, and it was that. So I thought I'd share a little poem that has been great for me in times of loss. And this is actually going to be part of a poem by Linda Glazer called After. She wrote it up upon the death of her father. And she talks at the beginning about that grief and that darkness. She says, "Is all darkness, the all-consuming absence, nothing will ever be the same. And yet, in time, softly, softly, like baby's feet, like spring itself after vacant winter, you return. From backstage corners, you make small appearances now and then. Blessedly mundane moments light my heart, At times, my heart speaks to you. At times, you answer. At times, the tears insist you are gone, unalteredly gone. But the realness of your life still breathes inside me. You have altered our world, and you still do. I see you in new ways. I grow, I learn from you. You are still present somehow in this great oneness, a beloved blessing, firmly planted among all those known and unknown whom you have touched or will somehow still touch. And the garden of your life continues to grow.
I'd like to say something. Go, Dave. Chasing the grandkid. Yeah. I don't know a lot of you, but I've seen a few familiar faces. One is Galena right here, the maestro pianist. Take a bow. That was fantastic. One thing I'd like to say is when my wife Marla and I moved into our townhome, we moved in right across from Ruby. And like a day later, Galena and Ruby came over to say hi and introduce themselves. And if you need anything, if you want anything, just let us know. It's so nice and sweet. My wife died of liver cancer about 3 years later. And Galena did the most beautiful thing. She came to talk to me. And Ruby came over and says, I'm so sorry. And she said, there anything you need, whatever. And it was a really nice friendship with her because she was a sweetheart, She loved music. I put my Bluetooth speaker up in the tree and I cranked Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. She loved Hank Williams and all those people, So she was really neat. And she started a tradition. Every Easter, she'd bring Easter lilies over to us. And then my wife and I would bring Easter lilies over to her. The last time I saw Ruby was in the hospital and I brought the Easter lilies over because I'd been knocking on her door and nobody answered. So I went to the rehab center that she was in, and I walked in and I said, hi, Ruby, I came to deliver your lilies. She says, who are you? I went, oh, you're the guy with the little white dog. And so she sat in the bed and we talked for a while, and I put the lilies down and went to get some water to water them. And I looked over and I said, well, I gotta go now. And she says, who are you? And I felt so bad, because my father died of dementia. He died alone with my wife and I. And again, she came over to express her condolences and all that kind of thing. What's going on? Are they telling me to go home? Well, anyhow, I got a lot of memories, and I just want to say that she was a sweetheart. Oh, another thing too, I'm a far right-wing Republican, and she was a left-wing Democrat. And every time I'd come over to her house, like I would put salt in her, she had, soft water, coconut salt water thing. And I'd bring the salt thing, pour it in the deal there. And every time I came over, she'd be watching CNN. I said, what are you watching that crap for? Turn it to Fox, Sean Hannity here. Tucker Carlson, who are they? But that was some of the fun that I had. And sometimes she'd forget her password for her phone or her computer, and I kind of help her with that. And here's another thing too. Sometimes I would shovel the walkway there because I was afraid she was going to fall. And I went up there one time and I said, hey, I came to shovel your walkway. You don't have to do that. That's the association's. That's why we pay so much money for the association. That's their job. I said, okay, fine. I took my shovel and went home. Next day, she broke her arm. And I used to get her mail for her too, if the weather was really bad, whatever. So one day I walked over and I said, Ruby, I'm going to get your mail. Oh, you don't have to do that. I can do it. I've been sitting around all day. The next day she fell and hurt her hip. So, and she was that way, she's like Mary Poppins. She was firm, but she was fair, She was thoughtful, she was musical, and she's just a sweet lady. And I couldn't believe that she passed away because I miss her. And then this morning, I saw there was a sign for sale for her house. And that really made it true that she's really, really gone.
I still think of her as being there. But then I saw the sign this morning. She's gone. That's all I had to say.
Hi, I'm Kay Richardson. I've known Ruby since 1998. I spent the winter in Phoenix or in Arizona, and I came back for Easter, and my partner Roy and I found a house when I was a new house when I was home for Easter. And so I went back to Arizona for a month, and the woman that I knew down there said, "Oh, I have a friend who's moving back to Minnesota. She was born and raised there, and you two, you might get along. I think she likes similar things." And so I met Ruby in '98. We both bought places in Plymouth. We ended up being less than 10 minutes apart. And so Ruby and I used to go to concerts, like Charlotte was talking about. We went to concerts. We went out to eat. If we got on an exercise diet, once in a while we'd say, "Oh, okay, we're going to start walking and doing things like that." So we do that for maybe a week or two, and then but and of course, and then there were the happy hours, because as most people know, Ruby loved her martinis. So we would go to happy hour. But I'm really missing Ruby, because we used to talk probably 4 or 5 times a week. And what I was thinking about today is how, we know each other's day-to-day life. I mean, and it's different than most people nowadays. With a friend, won't really know that because everybody texts, and there's Facebook and all these different things, but not really talking to one another and hearing everything about whatever is going on in their life. I would hear about Galena, and she'd talk about Galena's garden and her friendship, and she would talk, and of course her family. She loved her family so much, and it meant everything to her, and all the things that you did for her. And I was thinking about the last Christmas she was in Phoenix, and she had talked about that and how she loved being with those little kids, and I know she had hoped to get back there and all the times at the lake, and just all these different things that we would share on a day-to-day basis. And I miss that. I really miss my friend. There's a big hole in my life that, but the thing is that Ruby was such a good person. She cared about people. She cared about our world and everyone in it. And I've been thinking that our world would be a lot better place if there were more Rubies in it.
Well, thanks again. We can share stories amongst ourselves. Drive safely home. Have a wonderful, hey, guess what? 4th of July is also referred to as Independence Day. Right? Is that kind of fitting as it pertains to remembering Ruby? Independence Day, very independent. She truly has her true independence right now. So let's keep all of that fun celebration in mind as we comfort each other. And again, thank you. Drive safe on your way home, and everybody from Delano, thank you. And everybody who traveled, thank you. Arizona, California, it's a wrap. Thanks for joining us. And God bless you all.